When people picture the birth of the modern world, they imagine motion, sails catching wind, maps being drawn in candlelight, men stepping onto unfamiliar shores with steel, faith, and ambition in equal measure. But the true engine of global expansion wasn't movement, it was permission. Before there were empires that spanned oceans, before corporations ruled trade routes, before finance became a science, the biggest challenge wasn't distance or danger, it was uncertainty. In the late medieval world, sending ships beyond the known edge of the map wasn't heroic, it was financially absurd. Voyages took years, communication was impossible, loss was common, profit was hypothetical, and failure didn't come with insurance, bailouts, or limited liability. A single bad expedition could ruin a family, a city, even a crown. Europe didn't lack ambition, it lacked a way to make risk survivable. And that's where the real story begins. Because the age of exploration wasn't launched by explorers, it was enabled by institutions that never touched the sea. By the 15th century, Europe was exhausted. Centuries of war had hollowed out treasuries, plague had erased labor, rulers governed unstable territories with weak tax systems and unreliable credit. Money moved slowly, trust even slower. Under these conditions, long-distance exploration made no sense. You couldn't accurately price risk, you couldn't guarantee ownership, you couldn't even be sure that what you claimed would still be recognized when or if you returned. In modern terms, exploration suffered from a fatal flaw: no enforceable legitimacy. You could conquer land, but on whose authority? You could seize wealth, but would anyone recognize your claim? You could invest, but who guaranteed the outcome wouldn't be declared illegal, immoral, or void? What Europe needed wasn't better ships, it needed a system that could turn uncertainty into order. That system already existed. Long before global trade, there was already a global organization. It didn't answer to kings, it outlived dynasties. It operated courts, schools, archives, and legal doctrine across borders. It was the only institution in Europe whose authority was recognized across kingdoms, languages, and generations. And most importantly, it defined what was lawful. This institution didn't need to sail anywhere to shape the future. Its power traveled faster than any ship, through documents, decrees, and shared belief. In a world without international law, legitimacy was law, and legitimacy could be granted. Here's the part most people miss. This institution didn't bankroll expeditions with gold, it didn't supply ships or crews, it didn't extract resources with its own hands. It did something far more powerful. It lowered risk. By declaring who had the right to claim new lands, it transformed chaos into ownership, violence into governance, seizure into administration. When authority stamped a claim as valid, it changed everything. Suddenly, conquest wasn't piracy, occupation wasn't theft, extraction wasn't crime, it was policy. This mattered more than cannons or navigation because it answered the most dangerous question any investor faces: will my claim be honored? Once the answer became yes, capital followed. Think of it like this: exploration wasn't a gamble anymore, it was a pre-approved venture. Those who operated within this system didn't need to fear rivals contesting their spoils or allies condemning their actions. Their claims were recognized before they were even realized. That single shift reshaped the economics of expansion. Risk dropped, costs fell, scale became possible. Suddenly, repeated failure didn't end the project because the institution backing it didn't collapse when expeditions failed. It thought in decades, in centuries. Kings came and went, the system remained. Two powers were positioned perfectly to exploit this arrangement. They weren't the richest, they weren't the most populous, but they were aligned. Their expansion followed a pattern. Authorization first, action second. Ships sailed with legal cover already in place. Administrators followed soldiers. Clergy followed conquest. Governance arrived fully formed. What emerged wasn't exploration, it was deployment. And once extraction began, the effects were seismic. Massive inflows of precious metals destabilized European economies. Prices surged, fortunes multiplied and vanished. Entire monetary systems were rewritten by material pulled from continents no European had mapped a generation earlier. Yet the institution that made it all possible didn't demand profit shares, it demanded permanence. Instead of dividends, it secured position. Land grants embedded its presence. Mandatory contributions tied production to authority. Courts enforced moral and legal order. Education shaped worldview. Family life, labor norms, inheritance, all passed through its structures. Power compounded quietly. While wealth flowed through ports and treasuries, influence flowed through culture, law, and legitimacy. This was a different kind of return on investment, not revenue, but control. And it reproduced itself. Here's the loop that defined the era. Authorization justified expansion. Expansion enabled conversion. Conversion legitimized governance. Governance normalized extraction. Extraction funded further expansion. No single actor had to manage the system. The framework enforced itself. And because the institution controlled the narrative, what was righteous, lawful, inevitable, the system rarely had to defend itself. Nothing scales power like convincing people it is necessary. But no monopoly lasts forever, and this one didn't collapse from disbelief, it collapsed from defection. In the early 15th century, parts of Europe stopped recognizing the source of legitimacy that had underwritten expansion for generations. This wasn't just theology, it was jurisdiction. Rulers began claiming authority without external approval. Cities asserted independence. Merchants aligned with contracts instead of blessings. When that happened, authorizations stopped working universally. What had once reduced risk now meant nothing beyond certain borders. The referee had lost authority, and the economic consequences were immediate. Expansion didn't stop, it changed sponsors. Without shared legitimacy, risk returned, but it didn't disappear. It migrated from institutions to investors, from decrees to contracts, from moral authority to legal engineering. This is where the modern world quietly begins. In Northern Europe, a new model emerged. Instead of sacred authorization, ventures relied on pooled capital. Instead of divine legitimacy, they used legal personhood. Instead of missionary structures, they built corporate governance. The most powerful imperial instrument wasn't belief, it was the charter. Organizations were created that could wage war, negotiate treaties, mint currency, and govern territory, all without invoking any higher moral authority. Their legitimacy came from law and capital concentration. Risk was priced, failure was distributed, profit was scalable. This was expansion optimized for markets, not salvation. The consequences were profound. Colonies built under this system behaved differently. Without immediate extraction mandates, they focused on settlement. Land ownership mattered more than plunder. Institutions formed around contracts, courts, and property. Wealth accumulated slowly, unevenly, brutally, but it compounded. Different funding models produced different societies. Not better, not worse, different. By the late 17th century, the unknown world had largely been mapped. The age of discovery didn't end, it evolved. The question was no longer what's out there, it was how do we integrate it? Exploration became administration, expansion became optimization, empires became systems, and the logic persisted. Authority lowers risk, lower risk attracts capital, capital reshakes the world. Only the source of legitimacy had changed. Today, institutions still profit by authorizing risks they don't personally bear. Narratives still justify expansion. Legal frameworks still determine who can claim outcomes. Power still compounds through legitimacy more reliably than force. The sails are gone, the crosses are gone, even the crowns are mostly gone, but the structure remains. The age of exploration wasn't built on courage or curiosity, it was built on permission, on institutions that understood, centuries before modern finance, that the most valuable asset in any uncertain venture isn't money, it's the right to claim the result, and whoever controls that right controls the future. If this gave you a new lens on history, subscribe, because the past doesn't just explain where we came from, it explains how power still works.